Hi everyone, welcome to A Godly Home. This is going to be a Misfits market meal, and it's going to be a gnocchi casserole. And here I have some Misfits market tomatoes that I had gotten a while back when they had sent me more than I ordered. And I just cored and washed those and put them in a freezer bag. And then last night before I went to bed, I took them out of the freezer to thaw out. And now because they've been in the freezer, I can just peel those skins right off. Super easy. If you don't want to put them in the freezer, you can scald them in hot water and peel them. Now it's going to depend on how big your tomatoes are. But what I'm looking for here is to be able to get a full blender full of tomatoes. For me, that's 3 of these big tomatoes. And here they are after being in the blender. They're still a little frozen. Now I've got some of this olive oil, and I'm going to add about 2 tablespoons to the kettle. And if you do not have tomato paste on hand, add 6 tablespoons of oil to the kettle. So I have a piece of a clove of garlic, and I'm going to go ahead and use the garlic press. And this is from Misfits. Okay, now I'm just going to stir it around a little bit and get it to where it's cooking a little bit, but I don't want it brown or anything. That's why my heat is at a lower temperature. And I added just a little bit of kosher salt, but you could skip that because that gnocchi was salty. And then we added a little pepper. Give that a little stir. Okay, now I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of King Arthur flour, and you can get this at Misfits also if you don't have the tomato paste and you added the 6 tablespoons of oil, then make that 6 tablespoons of flour. This is going to be what helps thicken up our sauce. And now I am just stirring that around and browning that flour up just a little bit. All right, now I am pouring in that whole thing of blended tomatoes, and I have increased my heat to medium. And I am going to be whisking this and making sure all of that flour and oil mixture is smooth before I do anything else. Okay, now I am getting ready to start adding the spices. I am going to add 2 beef bouillon cubes. This will give the sauce a very nice flavor. Okay, now I have some, it says Italian seasoning, but it's more than likely probably dried oregano from my garden. But whatever you have, Italian seasoning or oregano, I put in about a tablespoon. Next, I'm using some dried minced onion. Now, I ran out of fresh onions, but you can use fresh onions or you could use onion powder. But I personally think this dried onion gives the homemade sauce a little bit different flavor than a usual sauce. Now the crushed red pepper. Go easy on this. A little bit of this goes a long ways. I actually could have used half of that. It was just right for me, but my husband was like, that is a little bit spicy. Okay, now I've got this half a can of tomato paste left over from when I made that enchilada sauce, and it's been in the freezer. And this is a perfect time for me to use it. So if you have some tomato paste, it will make it nice and thick without needing to use all of that flour and oil, and it will just be wonderful. So if you're using the tomato paste, use just the 2 tablespoons of oil and the 2 tablespoons of flour when we first started making this sauce like I did. Okay, now I got just a little bit of sugar, and I am just adding a tiny little bit just to take away some of the acid of the tomatoes. Now I'm going to put the cover on, bring it to a boil, and reduce the heat to simmer. Then to go with it, I'm going to be making this bread machine French bread. We've been making this for a very long time. This is a recipe that my son wrote out when he was a little kid homeschooling, and we've all got notes on it. I put awesome, and my husband drew a picture and wrote that it was also known as suspicious French bread. So I don't remember what that was all about, but we love this. And my son said today, after we ate this meal, that this is the only French bread recipe that he knows of that actually ends up tasting exactly like French bread. So I have the bread machine. If you guys don't have the bread machine, I would mix it up exactly as it says and then let it rise up 2 times, form it in a loaf, and bake it at 350 degrees until it's done through. Now I'm checking on the sauce, and you can see it's a rich, beautiful colored sauce, and it's got some thickness to it now. Once that sauce had simmered for about an hour, I just shut it off. Now I'm getting ready to saute some of this fresh spinach. It needs to be washed really well, even if it looks clean. I can feel some sand on this one. Then I'm putting my pan on medium heat, and I'm adding a little bit of the Misfits Vermont cultured butter to my pan. Now I'm gonna just chop all of this spinach up to about this size using a pair of my kitchen scissors, and I'm going to cut it up, stems and all. I'm gonna cut the whole package up and saute it because I don't plan on using all of it, but it will give me some sauteed spinach that I can put in a breakfast or a different pasta dish or whatever. I'm just going to try to stretch it a little bit. Now I'm just going to saute this a little bit to where the stems have a little bit of crunch to them, but are about halfway done. I don't want it too overdone, and I don't want it underdone. I did add a little bit of salt and pepper to them, but once again, that gnocchi is so salty on its own. I think just a little pepper on these would be perfect. And this is perfect. Okay, next I'm going to get this block of Parmesan cheese grated up. We won't use it all, but I might as well grate it all while I have the grater out. There it is. It's a nice amount of solid cheese that'll stretch really far. This ricotta is a full pound of ricotta. I'm only going to use half of that. So I use just half of that spinach and I'm stirring it into that ricotta really well. And you can see I have this much spinach left. And I'm going to put a little handful, about like that, of the grated Parmesan in there and stir that in really well. And then it's going to need a little bit of pepper. Okay, now the package says that we are going to cook this until it floats, and I'll go ahead and do that. And then once it floated like this, I drained it and got ready to make my casserole. Okay, now you guys know I try to keep these meals affordable for everyone and really stretch the ingredients out so that it's not too expensive. But by all means, if you want to use more of some of these ingredients, then you can go ahead and do that. I've got just a little bit of olive oil in the pan, and I'm going to just grease it with a paper towel. If you don't have the paper towel, just use your fingers. Okay, now I am putting all of the gnocchi into the greased 9x13 pan and trying to spread them out as evenly as I possibly can. And then I'm going to just drizzle it with some of my sauce. Sloopy, get out of here. Be a good girl. Not too much, just a little bit. This is my ricotta and spinach mixture, and I'm just spreading that on very thin and trying not to shift that gnocchi around too much. Now this is the last layer, just using the shredded Parmesan very sparingly, and I have all of that left. And I have all of this sauce left over. So that is over 3 cups of sauce left that I will put into the freezer for another meal. So this is what I ended up doing with that French bread from the bread machine. My son came down and took a look, and he wanted his cut up and made into pizzas that he could have now and then for his lunch tonight. And then my husband saw my son's pizza and he wanted one, so I took 1/4 of a loaf and made pizza style on his. And then I took this other 1/4 of a loaf and did butter, garlic, cheese, and parsley, and I'm going to pop these in the oven. Okay, there it is. I would have browned it a little bit more in the oven, but I didn't realize, or I guess I forgot, my husband had to be into work about an hour and a half early today, so I didn't have time to brown it up anymore. But I started it at a 350-degree oven, and then when I realized he was leaving early, I turned it up to 400 and left it as long as I could. Okay, everyone, that gnocchi casserole was so good. I had never had gnocchi before, and neither had my husband, and we both really liked it. Now, it is salty, the gnocchi, so do not add as much salt as you normally would when making the casserole. In fact, I could have left it out of the homemade pasta sauce that I made and then just added it to the leftover pasta sauce that will be used for another meal. But it was super good, and it didn't take very much to be filling. 1 serving spoon size is all that I ate, and 1 small piece of the French bread with cheese on it. So it was great. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Bye.